Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie Potts, and I'm sitting outside here in some blue sky February weather as I record this. And I just recorded a fantastic interview that you get to listen to finally today after I stopped talking with Dr. Mindy Pelez. And these topics we dive into today are hot items for me as a female aging athlete. And if you are, well, it doesn't matter if you're a female or not. This is information you should know for your spouse, your workout partners, for your family members. Females, as Dr. Stacy Sims says, are not small men. And Dr. Mindy figured out some things that I figured out that led us down these paths to research more. And Dr. Mindy's done a lot of more scientific research on how women should not fast all the time, how women should not be keto all the time. Women need to change the way they eat and train and fast based on their menstrual cycle. Also, perimenopausal, menopausal women, it's a little bit different. So we need to really embrace the aging process, change the way we eat, fast, train, exercise based on our hormones and how our body changes, and not blame the aging process, but embrace it. Today we're going to talk about fasting and how people can get started with fasting, as I love to dive into the why of everything. So instead of just jumping into a 16-hour fast, intermittent fasting, how can we prepare our body to do that? Instead of just going from a standard American diet, eating a lot of carbohydrates, how can you gradually switch to being more ketogenic or in nutritional ketosis, or just being low carb and get your body to be a fat burner, depend on that fat burning engine over the carb backup engine. We want to be metabolically flexible, but how do we do that? So if you go back actually on my website, debbiepotts.net, you can go back to 10 years ago. We started Fit Fat Fast podcast and have 100 episodes on how to become metabolically efficient as an athlete. 10 years ago, people. This is 2021 as I record this, and we started this journey on how to share some information with you as an endurance athlete and how to burn fat, how to improve performance, how to improve longevity. In 2011 with John Smith, we did Fit Fat Fast. So anyways, go back in the archives. You can dig into my website on the podcast section. You should be able to find the original Fit Fat Fast 100 episodes somewhere in there. But Dr. Mindy and I talk about specific times that we should and should not fast, what types of fasting are there. We kind of get into a little bit what differences are for fasting for women and female athletes. Also, how we can be too low carb, and when, especially a female athlete, different times of the month based on your menstrual cycle, that you do need a little more carbohydrates, and how we need to change kind of low carb ketogenic eating, carnivore eating, to a little more carbs certain days of the month. So working with your hormones is what we'll talk about. Also, I want to dive into how to prepare our liver, as the liver does over 500 jobs. There's a free ebook on my website, debbiepotts.net, about the liver. I did a couple years ago. You can grab on there under free ebooks. There's lots of ebooks under there, including metabolic efficiency ebook. That's really good. And the liver, we need to make sure it's functioning correctly. It's not congested. As I work with a lot of clients doing functional lab testing and helping create a nutrition and exercise program for them to get healthy and improve performance and longevity. But part of that is looking at their labs, and a lot of people have congested livers and they're not detoxifying, they're not having open drainage pathways. So I'll talk to Dr. Mindy about that. So hopefully you'll enjoy the show. I really was excited to talk to her. I was on her podcast a week ago as I record this today, and she's got an amazing podcast, YouTube channel that's huge. I didn't realize how big she was. But I asked Dr. Mindy, as I do all my guests, what is your mission, your passion? I like to know what their why is, what drives them. And she said her mission is to teach people that they have the power to control their own health, that the body they were born into is a miracle and their body was born to heal. Her passion is teaching people the healing principles of fasting, diet, variation, and detox. Beyond that, her main following is women between ages 40 to 60. She enjoys teaching women how to fast and how to eat where they are in their hormonal cycle. Her upcoming book is called The Menopause Reset. It'll launch on April 6th, so we'll make sure everyone orders that book. But the bio of Dr. Mindy is pretty amazing as well. So I'll put that into the show notes. But she is an author, keynote speaker, nutrition, functional medicine expert who spent over 2 decades of helping thousands of people successfully reclaim their health. She is a recognized leader in alternative health field and a pioneer in the fasting movement, teaching the principles of fasting lifestyle, diet variation, detox, hormones, and more, all my favorite subjects. Her popular YouTube channel combines the latest science with practical lifestyle tools every person can use to reset their health. She is the host of the leading science podcast, the Resetter podcast, and the author of 3 best-selling books, Menopause Reset, Reset Factor, and the Reset Kitchen. So I'll put all those links to her channels in the show notes. Let's dive into a great episode of the Low Carb Athlete podcast with Dr. Mindy. Enjoy. Let me know your thoughts and questions and feedback. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, I've got Dr. Mindy on the show to talk about one of my favorite topics lately is female athletes, women specifically in fasting, and kind of go into a little bit about how to prepare fast, when we should fast, when we should not fast, and how we should eat and exercise and all this stuff. So I'm so excited to talk to Mindy to come on my show today. I was on your show just a week ago. Suddenly it's February. We're like,
it was awesome. I know it does feel like weeks ago, right? Time is very odd right now.
I know. Time's just flying by. But let's kind of go into why you're hot into this topic. What led you into talking about women? And you've got a new book coming out. What's kind of your hot motivation here?
Well, it's so funny because fasting has been around forever. So it's kind of funny that it's like catching on now. And for me personally, I think everybody comes to fasting for something different. But for me personally, it was trying to solve my menopause journey. And when I hit 40, I was in the best shape of my life. I was eating all day long. I was doing paleo. Like I was really healthy. And then like somewhere between 40 and 43, like that didn't work for me anymore.
So me, I know.
Right? Like nothing changed. It's just that eating all day, not doing a lot of carbs, like it just, my health fell apart. Mm-hmm. So I really dove in to try to understand how to put it back together again. And I found a lot of pieces, and I lay that all out in the Menopause Reset, but I really found there were 5 things, and fasting was one of them. And I felt like when I first heard about intermittent fasting, I was like, oh, well, I guess I could do that like one day. Like that's what I thought. I was like, oh, I'll do that one day. Okay, I could skip breakfast one day. But then when I dove into the research, I saw that we really have a whole healing system that kicks in when we fast. And doesn't matter if you're eating all day long, you're never getting this healing system. Mm-hmm. So if you just look at metabolic flexibility, like we're sugar burners and then we're fat burners, and you never access the fat burning ketogenic energy system if you're eating all day, even if you're eating amazingly healthy food all day. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like the type of person, I had to understand the science. I had to watch other people do it for a little while. And then I jumped in and wow, I mean, I'm sure you've had the same experience, like just intermittent fasting alone. I found I didn't have to like pound the pavement workout wise to be able to stay the weight I wanted to stay. I found that my 3:00 afternoon crash went away. I didn't crash in the afternoon. We have this joke in my family where my kids would always say that I stopped in the middle of a sentence and I wouldn't complete it. And I think it was like my hormonal brain or toxins in my brain. But once I started understanding ketones and fasting, my brain, like I could carry on conversations and not stop in the middle of it. I could learn information differently. So it just opened this whole world of this energy system that you're not accessing if you're not fasting.
And it's really, you're talking about burning fat as your main fuel and getting the benefit of ketones to fuel your brain, to give you kind of that clarity and focus. So it's not about just eating more fat to be in ketosis, that you can do it via fasting. And it's what we talked about. It's very unintentional when you are fat adapted and you're burning fat, but most people are not. So how do we get started to prepare our body to be fat adapted, to become metabolically flexible? And then we start fasting, or kind of how do we get started with
that? It's such a good point, because I think the ketogenic diet has really gotten this bad rap that you're supposed to pull carbs out and eat a bunch of fat, and then all of a sudden you'll make ketones and you'll lose weight. And then people do that and they gain weight. So to your question about like, how do you prepare yourself? So I think the elevation of that conversation is fasting is a beautiful way to access this fat burning system. And you could actually pair it with almost any diet. It doesn't have to be a ketogenic diet. Now it will help, but it can be paired nicely with almost anything. So thank you for making that point, because I think we all need to be talking about that more. Preparation. So there's two ways I would say you got to prepare. One is, I'm not a fan of just like suffering into a fast. Like, I don't think you need to go from, oh, you're listening to a podcast like this and you're like, oh, I've been eating all day. Okay, how many hours am I should go 15 hours without food. Okay, let me try it. And then the next day you try it and you're like dizzy, you're going to pass out, you're yelling at everybody, you're angry. Like, it doesn't have to be like that. So I call it backing yourself in. Start by just pushing your breakfast back an hour. It is a nice hormetic stress, just enough to kind of create a little stress on your cells. And so that you're sort of warming up your body to understand that there's going to be a compression of your eating window and you're going to start to fast a little longer than just sleeping at night. So I always say, push it back an hour, do that for a week. And then you can push back your breakfast 2 hours, do that for another week. Then you can push it back 3. And just before you know it, the training wheels are off and you're naturally fasting. So I, as far as preparation goes, I think that's the first thing, is how do you approach the fast?
So not worrying about what you're eating so much as, let's start doing that time restricted eating window in a smaller time, like a 12-hour overnight fast is easy to start with that. And then let's get that going in and maybe build that up 16, then work on what you're eating at that time.
Yeah. Like the first step is like, instead of looking at your waking hours as you just can eat all day, just we have an eating window and a fasting window. So that's a huge mindset there. And how you approach the fasting window is exactly how I just said. Yeah. Now, to your point, the second thing is, if you're a carbaholic and you're doing carbs all day long, you're going to struggle with the fasting window a little more. So there's some ways we can even blood sugar out. And the best way, as you know, is to bring your refined carbohydrates down. So get your flours and your sugars and those quick, simple carbs, get them out, and then add in your healthy fats. So then you start to add in your MCT oils and your avocado oil. And I'm a big fan of some really high quality seed oils. Like, just work on building up your good fats while you're removing those refined carbs. And now if you do that with the pushing the breakfast back, it really gets much easier.
Yeah, because I think a big part of my show, my story, my purpose is to talk about chronic stress. And I think
Yep.
it's very that fine line of when is fasting beneficial, good, hormetic, positive stress. It's kind of on-off stress.
Yep.
Versus just adding to our bucket of stress that's already overfilling that cup. And then when you start fasting, and as you said, if you're not prepared, because you're just like, oh, I just read about fasting, or I keep hearing about social media, podcasts. But if you're coming from a carbaholic and you're already high strung out, is it good for that person to work on fasting? Because when is it not good for you if you're a typical type H busy person?
So this is where it gets really nuanced. So kind of hang with me here. We've fasted so many people that if you do those first two steps I just mentioned, even if the most adrenal fatigued person actually starts to notice that their adrenals can repair. Because if we just look at the concept of a hormetic stress, the hormetic stress is you're just putting enough onto a cell or an organ so that you're forcing it to repair. So I have really found those two steps, even in adrenal fatigue people, can work. Here's the nuance for women specifically. The only time I do not recommend a hormetic stress on the body is the week before your cycle. If you're a perimenopausal woman where you know your progesterone is really low, or you're a woman trying to get pregnant. And here's why. Or even nursing. Nursing women have to think about this too, is that in order to make progesterone, you've got to have a nutrient called DHEA. It's actually a steroid hormone called DHEA. And DHEA will make cortisol, it will make progesterone, and it'll make testosterone. So when your body is trying to make progesterone, if you are raising cortisol at all, then you now are going to, you shouldn't go into a hormetic stress, because the minute you go into that hormetic stress of even intermittent fasting, you are tanking your DHEA. You're raising cortisol, tanking your DHEA. You won't have enough progesterone. You won't have enough testosterone. So it's really, fasting has to be really different for women who are trying to get pregnant, obviously, or intermittent fasting, I should say, trying to get pregnant, and then perimenopausal women.
So what if you say you did your Dutch hormone test and your cortisol levels are already tanked? Does that matter?
Yeah. So if that was the case, I would work on your adrenals first. Yeah. I would power up with some nutrients and supplements and biohacks, but I wouldn't, if you do a Dutch and you're flatlined, like you're at the bottom level and there's no cortisol, then I would actually spend a month or two really building those up before you even try fasting.
I find most people, especially women that I'm working with, because we run all these different labs together and then look at the whole picture, that their adrenals are usually hypoadrenic, so low cortisol levels. And, you can see in the Dutch test, their DHEA levels, their estrogen, progesterone, all their hormones. So it's good to get that 24-hour picture of what's actually going on, not just the, doctor might just do blood tests into that one moment of time. So it's good to kind of almost get lab testing before you start going down this new journey of fasting and figuring out what is right for me as an individual, especially for females that are menstruating or premenopausal.
Yeah, I have a vision. I absolutely agree with you. And I have a vision I just came up with a concept called a fasting circle, where women could look along their cycle and decide, oh, hey, I'm in day 1 to day 10. I can do these fasts. Day 20, I should do these fasts. And now what we're trying to do is match the Dutch test to this fasting cycle, because the Dutch can really tell you if you should be fasting, when you should be fasting, what foods you should be eating. And this was really my journey when I discovered fasting in my mid-40s, trying to solve my menopausal issues. I fasted all the time, 3-day water fasts, 5-day water fast, 24. I mean, I loved it. I felt limitless. And then I ran a Dutch test on myself, and I was at that time, I was 46, 47, and my sex hormones were all completely tanked. Now, my adrenals were good, but my sex hormones were tanked. and it was worse than a postmenopausal woman. Like they were lower than that. And that is when I was like, wait a second, I'm not supposed to fast this much. And I started to dive into the principles of fasting and match them to our hormones.
I love that, because I found that my same experience with the fasting. It's like, well, when is, I've fought with HP axis, dysregulation, adrenal stuff since 2013 when I started testing it. And for years, we do the fasting in athletes, we work out fast and we do all this. And my question was, talking with you and on your show, and since then, I was like, when is it not good for us? And especially when you're athletic and you're premenopausal, and it's just such a amazing thing if you can really test and not guess what is going on inside of you and your hormones. Are we causing more stress, more damage, fasting too much and doing, also too low carb and not getting enough nutrients in our body? When is it causing us more damage than good? It's so hard to figure that out because everyone just does what other people do, and they're mostly men that are being compared to.
So the easiest way to understand this is if you still have a cycle, and let me kind of go through the cycle, and then we'll talk about menopausal women, because we sometimes don't know when our cycle's coming or going or what's going on. But in a 30-day period, we're just going to use 30 as an example. In the first half, from the day you bleed till the day you ovulate, which is around 10 to 12 days, the hormone that you're building during that time is estrogen. That is the main hormone. Now, you're going to get some testosterone when you start to ovulate, but estrogen's really ramping up. And what estrogen needs you to do is to be insulin sensitive. It needs that blood sugar to be down. It needs to have insulin be receptive to the cells. And so I find that from day one till ovulation, women can do really well with keto. They can do really well with all kinds of fasts. Really good there. Now, once we hit ovulation, the challenge we have is that we've got all these hormones at their peak. So estrogen is at its highest. Testosterone, that's the only time you're going to get it. So, which is, I find fascinating too. And you and I chatted about that. And then you've got a little blurb of progesterone. So now for that little period, and we call it, I actually, Dr. Carrie Jones and I geeked out on this together. And we decided, okay, 10 to 15 days would just create a period for women from day 10 of her cycle to day 15, where she can intermittent fast. But, you've got all of these amazing hormones. You probably shouldn't go into a real restrictive keto. You really want to work on your microbiome, because your gut is going to break down that estrogen and make it usable for the cells. So, there's a little bit, but you don't want to create a huge amount of stress, and low carb will be okay, but not extreme low carb. So like my version of low carb is under 50 grams. I wouldn't go under 10, under 20 at that time. And then when you come out of that period, day 16 to about day 19, now you can go back into some fasts. You can go back into, if you want to do a 3-day water fast, no problem. If you want to do a 24-hour fast, which is great for gut repair, no problem. You want to go keto, carnivore, you're good there. Mm-hmm. But then as we get closer, day 21 is where progesterone peaks. And that is when you need to chill out. And I recommend no fasting. I also recommend no keto. At that point, you want to lean into your squashes and your potatoes and your beans and citrus fruits, tropical fruits. These are foods that raise progesterone. You don't want to be running marathons. You don't want to start a new workout plan. Like the week before our cycle, we were really designed to nurture ourselves. And so that's not the time to push into more extreme rigidity.
That's why we have PMS. Right. You just don't feel like doing anything anyways.
It's why we crave carbs. It's why we crave chocolate. It's not because we're undisciplined, our body. It's why you're tired. Like your body's saying, sit on the couch, chill out. I'm just need to make some progesterone right now. And you and I really resonated with your story as well, because it was very similar to mine. It's like, if you're not honoring progesterone, then DHEA will just keep making cortisol, and it'll keep making cortisol, and it'll leave progesterone and testosterone behind. And without progesterone, as women, you're going to go into menopause earlier. So that's where all the women get like spotting and things like that. Anxiety, you're not going to sleep, depression. I mean, this is what I uncovered was we call that perimenopause, but really we should call it low progesterone, and we should say due to stress. So there has to be, like, if you start to follow the crumbs, you start to see what the root cause all comes back to stress.
But people will probably, as we say, you know, try to out supplement poor lifestyle habits and just take DHA and just like, oh, I'm going to just put a Band-Aid on it and treat hormone dysfunction or hormone imbalances with taking hormones. As I've had clients that are just on all these hormones, but they have all these problems still, and their Dutch test is like all crazy. So it's not, the solution is to, oh, okay, then well, I'm going to take some DHA.
Yeah.
Just better.
So I made a commitment when I got that Dutch test. I was like, I'm going to solve my menopausal issues with lifestyle. Like, I am not going to go on HRT. I'm not going on bioidenticals. I'm not going to say this magic supplement like changed my life. I'm going to be very mindful to try to do it with lifestyle. And I did, and it worked incredibly well. And the more I've worked with my lifestyle, I'm 51 now, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going through, I'm like, I thought I was going through menopause a year ago. And now it's so regular, and the symptoms are, I don't have the anxiety I used to have. Like, the symptoms are just very manageable. So I agree. We need to go back to lifestyle first.
So what lifestyle habits would you recommend? You kind of just mentioned them, but just kind of
So I say that there's really like 5 that you want to look at. And the first one is you want to build what I call a fasting lifestyle. So you want to learn how to use intermittent fasting at times, and you might even find some 24-hour fasts. You don't need to go into 3-day water fasts unless you want to, but you need to time them right. So you need to start compressing that eating window and elongating and creating a fasting window, more than the 8 hours maybe you were doing right now. I would love to see every menopausal woman do 13 to 15 hours, except for the week before her cycle when it comes. And we'll talk about that in a moment. The second thing is you really got to work on diet variation. And I love keto. I think it's phenomenal. It's a gift for the menopausal woman and the woman going through perimenopause. But then you got to step out of keto the week before your cycle when it shows up. You got it for, good 7 days. You don't want to be in ketosis. So that's like step number 2. Step number 3 is we really need to think about our microbiome. So we have got this amazing set of bacteria that break estrogen down and make estrogen very usable for the cells. So making sure that you're eating a lot of probiotic, prebiotic, polyphenol-rich foods. And this is where a gut test is really helpful, really understanding if your gut bacteria is in good shape. And then the 4th is some women have to detox the parts of the brain that affect our whole, well, you mentioned earlier, the HPA axis. Well, we've got an HPO axis and we have an HPT axis, and that hypothalamus and pituitary has to be in great shape in order for the endocrine organs to work. And it doesn't have a blood-brain barrier. So it's very susceptible to mold. It's very susceptible to heavy metals, glyphosate, pesticides, plastics, things that are in our environment. So a lot of women, as they go through menopause, have to learn how to detox. And then the last one, I can't take credit for this name, but I think I told you about the book, Rushing Woman Syndrome.
Yeah.
And the 5th thing is we've got to stop rushing. And this is where it catches up with us. I think what most women don't realize is at 40, what happens is your ovaries are like, I'm out. I'm done. Like, I've been working for you a really long time. I'm just going to slowly back up here, and I'm going to go into retirement. But you still need to make sex hormones, so it hands the job over to your adrenal glands.
Okay, and why doesn't every doctor tell the?
Right?
It's like,
I know.
It drives me nuts when I hear that. I've learned that nutrition therapy. Like, okay, why doesn't anyone know this? It's crazy.
Right. So, and this is why I wrote the Menopause Reset, because I was like, I feel like I want to like be the gatekeeper at 40 for everybody and be like, hey, I just want to give you an SOS what's about to happen.
Yeah, totally.
And stress is a biggie. And if you don't manage stress, like what you could get away with at 30 and 35, as far as stress loads go, you do not get away with at 45.
Yeah.
You're a great example of that, right?
I know. I was good. Like, age 29, I started, doing a lot, 25 years old. And then like 40, 42, just like downhill. Yep. So it does, after age 40, your body can't tolerate as much.
Yeah.
Stress.
And it's hard, those of us that are very capable women, we don't want to be told that we can't do something, right? Like you didn't want to be told you couldn't do a triathlon. Like that brings you so much joy. But this is where we have to learn to create some self-care, to create some downtime, and give ourselves the excuse to do it.
Yeah. And the self-care is such a huge thing, and keep trying to share people and write that about it because it's free.
Right.
And it's simple, and just creating new habits that you don't have to buy anything. It doesn't require anything in a bottle. It's just a lot of times self-care can just be nurturing yourself and being with loved ones, but getting outside nature and sunrise, sunset and all that. But, it's such amazing difference it makes. Just like my mantra, positive attitude, positive vibes, positive energy is one of my mantras, is just, surround yourself with positivity. And that's a good step to do. And notice your red flags. Know when to push pause, reset, alternate control, delete on your computer, do it to yourself, and reboot if it's going for a walk around the block, or just breathe. And it's all these simple little things people can implement in their day, and just being aware of when you need to slow down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's probably, I always say, of the 5 things that I tell women to do as they go through their 40s, that's the hardest one. Like that, I see with my resetter community, like people will hop onto fasting, they'll take carbs out. They're like, amen, sister. And then you're like, and don't work out as hard as you're working out. And you got to say no to more social engagements. Like maybe this was the gift of the pandemic, as it allowed us all to slow down. But that one is, right? That is the hardest one to do. Yeah,
for sure. Now, do we get through all of them? I just had it.
Yeah, that was,
question.
Yeah.
Okay.
And let me just say one more thing on this, because I think you and I, this is such a big part of our mission, is that we have, when we look at allopathic or traditional medicine, when we go into that environment, we go into our doctor's office, we tell them our symptoms, or her our symptoms, we're given a diagnosis, and then we're given a pill. And we've been doing that over and over and over again. And so then when we come to alternative ways of looking at health, we bring that same paradigm with us. And we're like, give me the pill. This is why it's like, oh, well, I get so many questions. Should I be on bioidenticals? And I don't have a problem with that. I don't think that I think it can actually help, but if you do that and do not change your lifestyle, you have missed a major piece of the puzzle here. And one of my concerns for women is if we don't correct lifestyle through our 40s, you are setting yourself up for cancer, for heart attacks, for Alzheimer's, dementia. So I think medicating our symptoms in our 40s, our menopausal symptoms, can turn deadly if you're not careful.
Yeah. Well, I just was looking at labs as I was talking earlier about, we'll get into more of the liver, preparing the body to fast and getting the liver function right to detox. And a lot of people's labs, their hormones, as I said, are out of whack, and their microbiome dysbiosis. They have signs of liver congestion and, all this stuff in the organic acids test. And you put all that together, and it's amazing that people are on hormone replacements, and their estrogens were like off the chart, and all these things. It's like, okay, well, what's the liver doing?
Right.
How is it functioning? People are constipated, or they're having diarrhea. I mean, stuff's broken in their body, but then they're taking all the supplements. I'm like, well, talk to your doctor. But I find it is it's not just, it's functional medicine doctors as well as naturopaths, is just addressing the whole person. I know it's difficult for people to have time to do it all as a doctor, but it's just so essential when if you are taking hormone replacement, are you looking at addressing the whole you as well as taking that supplement?
Have you seen, I see a lot of postmenopausal women who have not had a cycle for years, and they are still having hot flashes. They're still having all the symptoms of menopause, hot flashes, can't sleep, anxiety, because they didn't do it properly as they went through the actual transition. They didn't correct the lifestyle. So it's kind of like people have thyroid problems. They take the medication, but then they're not fully well because they haven't addressed the complete picture. Yeah. So it's really, I can't emphasize enough to come back to lifestyle. Whether you decide HRT is your path or not, you still need to come back to those 5 things that I mentioned.
But if we put that towards the female athlete, the aging female athlete, just writing about this, that if they're still trying to do 1 to 2 workouts a day, they're doing long distance stuff, going for long runs, that when is it counterproductive? And that we talked about before, causing more of a stressor and speeding up the aging process rather than improving it. And I think people get stuck, and including myself, realizing, okay, less is more is not better. If you were an endurance athlete and you still kind of love that feeling of going for a 2-hour run, but is it good for me? Is it causing more damage to my hormones?
Such a hard one, right? Because I come from the, if a little bit's good, more is better paradigm of life. So the first thing is, if a female athlete over 40 still has a cycle, the most important thing is to not push yourself that week before your period. Like if it's a regular cycle, you really should, if you were going to create like a cross training program, you would want to do more yoga, you'd want to do more walking, hiking. Like you should not be pushing yourself during that time. Now in the front half of your cycle, do it, that's where day 1 through like even day like 15, push yourself as much as you want. So it doesn't mean you have to be lazy the whole month. It just means that 1 week. Yeah. That's the first thing. The second thing that happens to a lot of perimenopausal women, and this really happened to me, is that we don't really know when our cycle's coming. So, but we have some like indications. And one of the indications is spotting. All of a sudden you start spotting, and then like 2 weeks later, you get your cycle. Okay, well, that is your body trying to make progesterone. So what I learned to do is tap into those moments. When I was spotting, I would say, okay, my body wants to make progesterone. Let me not fast. Let me eat more carbs. Let me do more yoga. Let me not do my long runs. And then I found that the more I did that, the more regular my cycle got. So you can use spotting as a way. You can also use your hunger. If I find that when I'm not trying to build progesterone, I can fast no problem. But when I am, then when I feel that hunger in the morning, again, it's indication my body's trying to make progesterone, and I adapt my workouts accordingly. So I think the first thing is to really get in touch with your body and understand. This is where, again, a Dutch test would be very helpful, but also understanding if you because progesterone's already going down. You're losing it. It's never coming back to what it was in 20 and 30. It's going to keep going down. So you want to start varying your exercise and tapping into those signs of low progesterone. If you're postmenopausal, you need to vary your exercise. You can run marathons, but you need to counteract that with yoga, and you need to have a good recovery process. And then the last thing I'll say, and you and I talked about this, and this is something new I've been contemplating, is that I watch in my own body and in my patients that are going through menopause that my joints are much more vulnerable at certain times of the month. And I believe it's when estrogen is low, because estrogen is a lubricant. So it lubricates our mucosal membranes, but it also lubricates our joints. So I think we have to be sensitive to when estrogen is low. And how would we know estrogen is low? We can feel it in our skin. Most women, as they go through menopause, they like can feel like, oh my God, my skin feels so dry. They might be thirsty. But if you are getting these moments where you're getting injured all the time, again, you need to start to lean into some more recovery days.
And I think that's hard for people, as we were speaking before and on your shows, that the type A, AAA personality, ambitious, high performing individuals, that those people probably are listening are athletes, and those are just driven in life in general to succeed.
Yep.
What are they going to do? Push through it. I'm tough. I can fast, even though my body's saying I need to eat. Oh, I got to push, and I'm going to fast till 16 hours or 24 hours. And people always override those signals to say, okay, I've had enough. I need a break, or I need to eat, or I need to do a walk instead of a run. And I think that's a challenge. And what I always find people to teach people how to listen to your body saying, okay, this is a good time to stop and let's adjust, modify, versus pushing through that. And I think that's what most of us tend to do, because women are strong and like to just be successful. Wonder Woman.
And we've trained, those of us that are athletes have trained our brain when we feel pain to override it. Like we've learned to not listen to it. Yeah. So I think the simple strategy is over 40, you need more exercise variation. Just be aware that if you are an athlete that likes to push on through, you're going to need some more Pilates, you're going to need some more yoga, you need to vary it. So like for me, I went from running long distance in my 30s to I only run twice a week now. And then I have a day I do yoga, and I have 2 days I do HIIT training, where that is more of my strength training, more short burst training. So I'm constantly varying it as much as possible. And then I look for clues like the spotting. I look for am I getting injured a lot? I look for if my heart starts beating or racing a lot. I look at my life and I go, oh my gosh, I've been really burning the candle at both ends. And those are the times that I do not push my workouts. I actually have trained myself to be more restorative.
Yeah. And I think that's, going back to your original conversation about fasting for women and when not to fast, and when it is a stressor, and learning going with your cycle. We just need that menstrual app, fertility app that people have with Training Peaks, and put it all together. How do people can track everything, know when to exercise, which type of workout, when to lift weights, when to do HIIT training, when to do endurance, and then when to eat what, and when you should put your fasting days in, and put that all into program, which you are doing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always laugh because I actually started tracking my cycle at like 47 for the first time.
Yeah. But nothing to do with getting pregnant. It was more about.
Yeah. Tracking. I not trying to get pregnant, obviously at 47, but I was trying to time my fast. I was trying to time my food, my workout, and like understand my cycle. And the one I love is the Clue app. It's what we use the most. And it's really been helpful for me to understand what the needs of my body
now, are you tracking that with your other data from your like HRV? Are you doing that info and tracking that with your cycle?
Yeah. So the other interesting thing I've seen is that the week before my cycle, my HRV goes down and my sleep gets worse.
Yeah.
So then I go, okay, if you'd go off like the Whoop band or the Oura Ring, on the Whoop band, you've got your recovery, and it tells you like what your strain should be that day. If I didn't recover well, it doesn't matter where I am in my cycle, I do not push on through the next day.
Yep. That's what people have to learn sometimes the hard way, that if you
Super
do that,
hard,
what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Not good results.
Yes.
If you're results driven, you think people would be motivated to get into all this if you're a results oriented person.
Yep. So, but how many aging athletes have you seen, women that they hit a wall and then they can't do anything? They're so injured. They have to have a hip replacement. They can't do anything. I mean, your story is an example. So if we could learn to lean into these signs ahead of time, you'll be able to keep going until you're 80, 90 years old. So the game has to change at 40. You have to think about your 80-year-old self. What does your 80-year-old self want to be able to do? Yeah. And if you don't make those adaptations, your 80-year-old self is not going to work out at all.
I know. That's what I've been saying for a long time. I want to go travel Europe when I'm 80 years old and be able to ride the bike in Tuscany and not be the person. Oh, where Portugal last year, I was in Lisbon, and you see the people hiking up the hills, the streets, or they're taking that little trolley thing, the little car. It's like, that's when I don't want to be that person.
Be me either. Yeah, exactly. So we do it. It's just the vision has to shift. Mm-hmm. And I think because we live in a culture that we just don't really fully address our health until a symptom shows up or a crisis shows up. Yeah. And what I'm saying is after 40, let's just make some shifts now so that at 50, I feel more wise than ever before. I can't even imagine what I'm going to feel like at 60 and 70. Like your kids I have one kid out of the house. One is going to graduate from high school this year. It's like, you're just coming into this beautiful place of life. You don't want to be injured. You don't want to be struggling with menopausal symptoms. You want to like step into the brilliance that you are at that point.
So true. I know. Just going back to some of the questions, make sure we touch on everything, but I think we talked a little bit about how low carb should women go, and especially athletes. We talk about fasted morning workouts and should I eat afterwards? And that's a different subject, but just for women, and you're talking about keto and when it's not good. And I think that'll probably be in your new book coming out.
Yeah.
Anything you want to touch on there we didn't bring up? Because I think people tend to go, like you said, 50 grams or lower, but some people, they say 20 grams. And I think that's too low for a lot of female athletes, and that really you can tolerate more.
Yeah, I think it's really low. I think 20, I've seen 10, and I think in short spurts, they'll be okay. But what I see a lot of women do is that they go into these extremely low carbohydrate states. They get an incredible result, so they never want to change that. And then other symptoms start to arise, and then they also start to they don't get the result that they had before, because we are meant for variation. We're meant for metabolic switching. We're not meant to be fat burners all the time. We're not meant to be in ketosis all the time. We are meant to go out of ketosis and into ketosis, and the actual magic is the in and out. So I would say that as far as low carb, that's the first thing. The other thing that I think, and I'm sure you're seeing this with your clients, is I really feel like we need to give protein a little more credit.
That was my next question.
Yeah. Especially as we age, because we have to fight for muscle. So there's a couple ways we can do that. One is there's incredible research on protein cycling. Mm-hmm. And that is where every couple of hours, you're doing 20 to 30 grams of protein. And by the end of the day, if you divvy up the different, your protein that way, you end up with about 150 grams of protein that day. That is actually the best for stimulating something called mTOR. Mm-hmm. And mTOR is going to create growth. It's going to especially create muscle growth. So that I love, like doing that around strength training workouts. I have some videos I did on YouTube on that. And I love that hack. The second hack, and now I learned this from a man, and we're testing it right now. I think I told you that I interviewed Thomas Daylauer, who has an incredible YouTube channel, and he's just a beautiful man and very intelligent. What he likes to do is work out in a fasted state and then break his fast post-workout with protein. Mm-hmm. He doesn't do fat. He doesn't do carbs. He just has like eggs or a sausage or a steak. And then an hour after that, then he will end up doing some fat or some carbohydrate. Mm-hmm. And he says he notices more muscle growth that way.
Yeah, I'm all for eating more protein. I interviewed Dr. Gabrielle Leon last year and listened to her speak at our nutritional therapy conference, and which happened before that. That was like last conference I had back in February before everything changed last year. But it's interesting. She was telling me think I told you that whatever your goal body weight, say you want to be 150 pounds, you should have 150 grams of protein a day. And I've always heard that you only can break down, digest 20 to 30 grams of protein. So that makes sense. Put it in there. But what if you're not hungry? Like, do I have it? I like after workout having keto aminos. Cause I just put a scoop, put it in water, and that's great to do after a workout. But then I don't feel like eating for another couple hours. So it makes sense to me. You have like a drink mix with aminos as keto because it's good quality. And then maybe have your meal and have it more protein based. But I think women are so afraid of eating protein, and I think a lot of people who go keto, which is the whole keto carnivore, world is having enough protein. And we're so trained to have everything fat free, but having protein is fearful for people, and they don't realize that, okay, what happens when we get older? We lose muscle, we lose our strength. And why do you just accept that as part of the aging process? Let's not blame the aging process, but do something instead. Lift weights and eat more protein.
Yeah, because we have to fight for muscle a little more, so you've got to have protein to be able to fight for that muscle. I have a couple of thoughts on it. And I love the idea of the aminos and breaking, like a post drink would be that great to have the keto aminos would be awesome. It's a great idea. The second thing is I just did some research on leptin resistance. And what they found is one of the ways to make yourself leptin sensitive again, and this is for women who struggle to maybe lose the belly weight, or they just like to lose extra weight. A lot of times you're not just insulin resistant, but you're leptin resistant. And what they found was that a low carb diet will absolutely help with lowering insulin resistance, but it doesn't help with lowering leptin resistance. But if you take that same low carb diet and you increase the protein, they did it between 15 to 20% increase of protein. You kept your carbohydrates down, so you kept it the same as you were doing before, that you actually now not only solved the problem of insulin resistance, but you overcame leptin resistance as well.
That makes sense, because leptin makes you feel full and satisfied, right? So what makes me feel full and satisfied? When I have more of a protein meal. But what people I think are fearful a lot of times I hear is the gluconeogenesis. What if I eat too much protein? I'm not going to be in ketosis and burning fat. So they're afraid, I'm going to increase my glucose by eating protein through gluconeogenesis. Yeah, well,
all you have to do is look at some of the carnivore lovers to know that's not true.
But I think that's changed because of all the carnivore research they're doing. And those people, I have so many people that went from keto to carnivore that, you can watch on Instagram, and then they look pretty amazing. And maybe that whole gluconeogenesis from eating too much protein is not an issue.
Yeah. The thing to know about gluconeogenesis, this is where fasting comes into handy. Is all we need to look at and address is we need to address the glucose coming in, and we need to address the glucose that has been stored. So those two parts of the glucose conversation need to be addressed. So when we go into a keto life, what we're doing is we're stopping the glucose from coming in, but we're not always getting to the stored glucose. And that's where fasting comes in.
To deplete it.
Yeah, you got to deplete it with fasting. So if you are doing, this is why this switching, the variation really makes a difference. I have found you can have a lot more freedom with your diet and your carb load if you're tapping into that stored glucose on a regular basis through fasting. And I can actually see it like I just got done doing a month of a continuous glucose monitor. And I came out of the holidays doing a little more carb. It was a pandemic holiday, so it wasn't as prolific with parties as it usually is, but we were definitely more carb centric, did a lot of big family meals. And what I noticed is at 2 a.m. on my CGM, I would get this dump of blood sugar. Yeah. Well, I kept with more lower carb, more carnivore diet, more fasting throughout the whole month of January. And within 2 weeks, that 2 o'clock in the morning dump went away. So it's the magic's in the variation once again.
Yeah. That's another conversation, but that's what I found when I was wearing my NutriSense for 2 weeks. It was that 2 a.m. and I asked questions. No one really researched it. I said, okay, well, I know in Chinese medicine that's called liver time. And does that have to do with their liver? If parasites, stuff, activity during our sleep, what's going on. But it's interesting to see how you adjusted it after a month tracking it and
Right.
doing that little self biohack,
Yep.
so to speak, on changing what you're eating and lowering those carbs. But because it's interesting, a lot of people had that same experience. Like, okay, why is my blood sugar increasing while I'm asleep? Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. We get a lot of people in our community that say, I woke up and my blood sugar was higher than it was when I went to bed. What happened? And so it's something called the dawn effect, where your body is dumping. The liver will do what it needs to do. The body repairs when you sleep. And so at 2, 3 in the morning, it dumps the extra glucose out. It's a beautiful thing. It's not, you shouldn't get upset about it. It's like taking a sponge and wringing out the glucose out of the liver. And yet in the morning, it'll show up that it's there. And again, as you work these principles over time, the storage becomes less and less and less.
Yeah, so interesting. So I know we're going to be out of time already, but I think, we talked, the other question had benefits of fasting to burn fat, optimize health, your immune system, performance in life and athletics. Kind of touched about anything that
well,
we
the
missed
immune
on there?
system, I think the immune system is really important to talk about, because again, if we go back to, there's 2 ways we burn energy, one from sugar and one from fat. What I spent a lot of time in 2020 trying to understand how we could use a fasting lifestyle to help the pandemic at hand. And there's an incredible study that came out in October of 2020 showing that, and this was not just unique to COVID-19, but it was also to other viruses, that if a virus comes into a cell that is a sugar burner, viruses alone by themselves don't have any energy. They have to live off of our energy. And so if you are a sugar burner and that virus comes into that cell, it will gain momentum and it can continue to replicate because it will live off your sugar burning energy source.
Like a cancer cell.
Like a cancer cell. But if it comes into a cell that's a fat burner, what happens now is it literally shuts down. It cannot use the ketogenic energy pathway to replicate itself. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, why
don't we hear this?
We're all debating masks and vaccines. Why are we not talking about, let's just get everybody fat adapted so that we can shut down viral replication?
Yeah. That's another episode too.
Right.
And I was listening to Mike Mutzel. I was listening to it twice. He just did a great podcast on it, immunology and the virus, and just a whole research coming out, probably similar studies about insulin resistance and eating the fast food and the soda and all that stuff. It's like, okay, are we ever going to get out of this pandemic? Because we're never hearing the truth about the other side of wear masks, do that, social distance. But media is never going to tell us about this fasting and what you just said, burning fat. Right. I mean, it's so simple, but
it's so simple.
Sadly, we're never going to hear it from the government or media because they're endorsed by sugar companies and pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah. We've got, that's a whole nother, I just interviewed Marianne Williamson on my podcast, and she had, when she ran for president, she had an amazing healthcare plan that nobody talked about. And it was called a whole health plan. And it was about addressing the whole person. How do we get to chronic disease? And she made a point that big ag and big pharma their money is so tied into media and politicians that the messaging we get support you eating more and you taking more drugs. And so it all of a sudden, it's as crass as that sounds, I think podcasts like this, where we can talk a little more freely about what the science is imperative. We have to have these conversations, because what you're seeing on your daily news feed is completely backed by those two industries.
Yeah, so frustrating. So
agreed.
The big question I want to finish with, and I know if you have a little time to go into this.
I do. I'm good on time.
The importance of liver function, as we talked about before we started recording. part of the benefit of fasting is that cell autophagy and cleaning house of our dead cells. And what no one really talks about is, we mentioned a little bit about preparing your body for fasting, but no one talks about preparing the liver to detoxify. So if you're going to longer fasts, I have clients that are trying to detox parasites and dysbiosis and mold toxicity, and really preparing their liver. Are you getting phase 1, phase 2 support, the nutrients it needs? But the main thing we want to start with is the drainage pathways. Are we sweating, peeing, pooping, breathing heavier? What can we do to get those drainage pathways open? So we want to start with phase 3, then go to phase 1 and 2. But what do you say about that? Because I know you had a great video. I can put your links in the show notes for your show, but I think it's a huge topic that no one
It's a huge
into.
topic. It's another one that nobody's talking about, right? So, okay. So for a really interesting perspective is that we want so desperately to repair organs, but organs are no good if the lymph that carries the toxins out of them is congested. And the area that's probably the most congested in the whole entire body is the common bile duct. The common bile duct is carrying all the toxins out from the liver, from the gallbladder, and dumping it into the small intestine. And if the small intestine has any dysbiosis, those bacteria are going back up into the common bile duct, and we have a massive traffic jam going on there. So two of my favorite, I agree with supplementation. I mean, this is where you do need to lean into supplementation, but I also like things like coffee enemas. We recommend castor oil packs a lot for that area. Yeah, because it can get in and dilate. So if you know you have some liver congestion and you want to build a fasting lifestyle, you're probably going, and a lot of people who can't get into ketosis is because of a stagnant liver.
Yeah.
So you're going to want to love on the liver to be able to even make that switch over to this energy system, because the liver is what registers that the blood sugar has gone down and it's time to make ketones. So if it's not making that switch, you got to go in there and love on the liver. And those two ways are good. Supplements are good. You can look into things like infrared saunas are great. Rebounders, getting lymph of all kinds moving. I even think breathing techniques, because the lungs are also an exit point for toxins. So there's a lot more to lymph that nobody's talking about.
Dry brushing.
Dry brushing. Yeah.
I just think, a rebounder, I found a $40. It was $38 on Walmart. People can get, and you're not doing like jumping jacks and backflips. It's just bouncing. And that's all you need to do, say 5 minutes a day or a few days a week to get that lymphatic flow going.
I told you I interviewed Kelly Kennedy on my podcast, and I really recommend you bring her on because she is the lymph expert. She calls herself the lymph queen. And I said to her, like, how did you become the lymph queen? And she goes, well, nobody actually like sets out to study lymph. What happens is in the functional medicine world, we get excited about the organ and we want to help that organ. And then all of a sudden we realize you can't help the organ until you allow the drainage to happen. So you'll love that interview. You guys will get along. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah. I just think it's such a big topic. And in nutritional therapy as practitioner, when I took that program, you learn a lot about the lymphatic system and dry brushing and the rebounder and all that. And then you start, looking at lab testing and determine a protocol for people to get better and help heal, rebuild, restore back to optimal levels. But what I keep coming back to is the liver function, detox, drainage pathways. And so many people have issues. And I think it's a big thing, even if you're not trying to do a detox program, but as you're saying, starting to do intermittent fasting, switching to a low carb, higher fat, protein diet. Is your liver functioning? So many people, I think most people don't have good functioning liver, just because of your just daily stress, the toxins, the alcohol, smoking, just the toxins in your household, mold toxicity. It's just amazing how much stress our liver takes and how we really want to take care of it. Do you do anything specific for your like a liver detox or?
Yeah, I do.
Reset?
I have a metabolic clearing kit that we do. I'll do that a couple times a year just to clean things out. Coffee enemas are great. Castor oil packs are easy because you just slap them on at night. So definitely. And then, unfortunately, we've got to look at things like limiting alcohol. Even though I love wine and like dry farm wines. In fact, I ran this past Carrie Jones because on my CGM, when I drink wine, my blood sugar goes down, because it chills me out. So I'm like, oh, well, that must be good. And she laughed. She's like, you still have to detox estrogen. So, making sure you're not drinking night after night. And this is where the perimenopause woman struggles a little bit. The type A woman struggles because that glass of wine at night is the thing that calms us down. So, but being mindful of that can be really powerful for the liver.
Well, I never could get pregnant probably because of all this. So I never had kids, but it is interesting how many friends that when they had younger kids, they started drinking every night. It's like, oh, that glass of wine just calms me down. I'm like, what? Why do you need wine every night? Everyone feels better with it.
Yeah. Well, and same thing with the pandemic. I mean, drinking, there's a lot of statistics that alcohol use just went way up. Yeah. So then you go, okay, wait, this isn't helping us because we need everybody to be in the ketogenic energy pathway to shut down viral replication. You need glutathione to help fight this virus. And alcohol depletes glutathione and pulls you away from being in that energy system. And then you start to see the vicious cycle we're in.
Yep.
A little depressing.
I know. Find that positive note to end on. So
yeah, I was just going to say, well, actually, I'll tell you about a study, an article I read this morning that the number of cases in India are dramatically going down.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, so they're like an outlier. They were trying to figure out what is it that they're doing. And there were two things that were takeaways for me. One is they believe that their immune system has been exposed to so many weird things with malaria and typhoid fever and all these things that they actually have a stronger immune system. So if you look at our immune systems, we're so hygienic here in America that we have lost sight of the fact that germs can actually create an immune system that's really strong. And then the second thing, and this is where I get hopeful, is they said that it's the hotter, warmer climate is that in the cold, the virus has a tendency to replicate. Well, we're going to come out of winter here in America pretty soon.
Yeah. So that's good.
Yeah, exactly.
So where do you find more information about you? Give all your links and talk about your new book coming out.
Yeah, so the Menopause Reset is ready for pre-orders. You can go grab that on Amazon. And I just lay out exactly what I did for my menopause journey. I talk about these 5 principles. It is meant to be a book you can read quick and apply quick. So I'm really excited about that. YouTube, I got a ton on YouTube. So if you want to know, I do 2 videos every week. I bring the science. So if you want to know how to apply fasting, that's a great place. And then my webpage, we're constantly putting resources there.
Yeah. And then where do you find science? Where's the best place for people to do research? They want to geek out and dive into all these things that you find.
Yeah, well, so that's actually a really good question. Here's a really unknown fact that some people don't realize. All of my videos, that if there is science that I am quoting, I put the article in the notes. So if you like the science, just go into my notes and you'll see that I've linked them there. Okay. Otherwise, the greatest place to go research for science is PubMed. Just if you ever want to end up down like a rabbit hole, just type in whatever you're looking for and you'll get hundreds of thousands of peer-reviewed journals. I think the best fasting journal article that has ever been put out was put out by the New England Journal of Medicine. And it was put out December 2019, and it was a meta-analysis of over 1,500 different peer-reviewed journals. So, and they show exactly different times of fast. They talk about conditions that fasting is really good for. And the New England Journal of Medicine is the medical profession's go-to journal. So what was really exciting for us is when that came out, they actually state in there that medical doctors should look to fasting, intermittent fasting as a go-to, the first line of treatment for things like diabetes, heart disease, certain cancers, Alzheimer's, a lot of other neurodegenerative conditions. They lay it all out in that article. So yeah, you can go. I have a video called Why Your Doctor Should Be Recommending Fasting, and it's in there.
That'd be great. Maybe Dr. Barry's about the only one. Dr. Westman and you.
Right? I do not know why. I think that doctors fear what they don't know. And so, and also you got to also look at the lens in which your doctor is looking at health through. And so many medical doctors have been taught one diagnosis, one pill, that's your go-to. And they don't get enough nutrition. They don't get enough lifestyle suggestions. So there's a world that I see where we could all exist together and we could collaborate, because there's a time for medicine and then there's a time for lifestyle. And if we could all come together, it would be in the benefit of the patient.
Well, I've always thought everyone should have a referral system. As a personal trainer for years, I don't try to be a chiropractor or a doctor, physical therapist. I refer out, and then why don't doctors, we work together? Okay, I need some health coaching and work on their nutrition and lifestyle habits and assess all this information together. Let's hire Debbie and just work on having this team of people to help people really become health optimizers and healthy. So
yeah, I absolutely agree.
Well, I love what you're doing. Everyone should, for sure. YouTube videos are fantastic. There's so much great information on there, and you have such good, vibrant energy. If I get excited about something, I can't shut up about it. And I think like my biggest plea for people is your body is so powerful. If you understood how well it was designed, you would never doubt it again. Yeah, it's amazing.
You just weren't given the manual. You were actually given the opposite manual. And so you've got to start to learn how to use it appropriately.
Yeah, so true. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mindy. And we'll put all the links in the show notes, you guys, to make sure you go down there and get all that information and learn more. And then hopefully we can bring her back on to talk about the app that will create the training, exercise, nutrition, and menstrual cycle for women. Someday that will be out.
Yes, we're working on it. The book got the new book on the fasting book for women went to the editor on Monday night. So that will come out hopefully at the end of 2021.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hey guys, before you leave, I want to leave you a special discount to use in the month of March 2021. Use the code The Low Carb Athlete when you are checking out on seekinghealth.com. Seeking Health, if you haven't heard of it, is one of my favorite go-to educational and supplement companies, created by Dr. Ben Lynch, one of my favorite experts in nutrigenomics and the author of one of my books I've read many times, Dirty Genes. Dr. Ben Lynch created Seeking Health as a source of research-based products and educational tools to guide your search for truth in healthcare. So when you're wanting to support your body with high-quality, bioavailable nutrients, you set the stage for lifelong health. Seeking Health supplements are scientifically formulated and extensively tested for purity and potency. Now, the tools you need to optimize your genes and overall health are within your reach. So use the code The Low Carb Athlete to get 10% off your order. Check out their vitamin D3 and K2 drops, or vitamin A, or my favorite, glutathione plus in liposomal form. Also, their chewable zinc tablets and vitamin C liposomal drops are amazing. So check out the Seeking Health website and grab that 10% discount code with the Low Carb Athlete. Enjoy.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.